Everything you know about aircraft design is wrong, because this aircraft is asymmetrical. But surprisingly, this insane design is actually more stable than a mirrored plane, more aerodynamic, and built for war. That's right, the Nazis took this concept to the next level and designed not one, not two, but three incredible physics-defying aircraft that would rule the skies over Europe. Or so they hoped. Because it just wasn't gravity that they had to fight, but the very minds of the high command who weren't sure to be afraid or to laugh at this truly out-of-the-box design. This is the incredible tale of asymmetrical aircraft and the legendary Blom and Voss BV-141. Our tale actually begins before World War II, when the German Aviation Ministry, or RLM, needed a new scout plane as part of the Nazi rearmament plan, and to fill the role of a forward aircraft for blitzkrieg tactics, to help identify possible targets as they steamrolled across Europe. This plane was to have a single engine, a 3-person crew, and try to have an unmatched visual vantage point. And let's focus on that second point. Because the issue with most aircraft at that time was the propeller blocking the view. The propeller being at the front of the aircraft meant that the pilots couldn't really see much forward, let alone down. And to both the left and the right, the wings were in the way. But that's not the only issue with a propeller on the front of an aircraft. Because of how a prop shaft rotates, the aircraft would drift either to the left or right thanks to the rotational forces, meaning a propeller in front not only had poor visibility for an aircraft, but also less than ideal handling. So what if we were to move the engine away to, say, another part of the aircraft, such as using a pusher prop or a propeller in the middle of the fuselage? But this aircraft design would go even further. Not even invited to attend the Scout aircraft meeting, German designers Blum and Voss decided to put together their own superior asymmetrical concept, claiming that it would blow the rest of the competition out of the water. And right away, you can tell that the asymmetrical design is a pretty radical departure from other aircraft, with the engine on the left in the tailplane and the crew located in the right gondola. The crew complement was 3, a pilot, an observer, and a rear gunner, all of whom were housed in a crowned plexiglass gondola, also nicknamed the Coffin, which I'll get into later. So let's break it down how this aircraft would actually be quite stable. Looking at it, you might think that it would have a tendency to roll, but the wings themselves provided equal lift and prevented the aircraft from pivoting in either direction, and also the center of gravity being in between the two fuselages. However, the yaw backwards and forwards due to the thrust and drag was more complicated, particularly at a low airspeed. But thanks to the P factor, also known as the asymmetrical disc loading, which is simply the uneven thrust distributed across the propeller disc when the aeroplane is at a high angle of attack, say climbing or coming in to land at low speed, the aircraft would actually get a boost in the opposite effect on the yaw. And at high speeds, they were just trimmed to prevent the counter movement, so the aircraft was stable in all directions. Isn't physics fun? As you probably noticed though, the tail was not symmetrical either, with the starboard tailplane being removed to improve the rear gunner's field of view and fire. However, despite how clever it was the German Air Ministry that wasn't on board. They actually already had another aircraft in mind for the scouting role, the AR-198, and already had a prototype in the works, with Focke-Wulf providing a backup solution if that didn't go ahead. Ernst Udet, the newly appointed Chief of Development section at Blum and Voss, said, "Stuff it. We'll build our own prototype to prove that this design works. We'll prove it to them all." And it turns out that they did, with the first BV-141 prototype, designated HA-1410, flying off into the skies on February 25th, 1938. And it was a great aircraft. There was really no issues handling it, and proved to have superior vision compared to the competition. And about that competition, well, it turned out itself had issues with stability at low speed, and because it was slow as heck, this would be all the time. Who would have thought? So this time round, the ministry was a little bit more open to, let's say, unconventional ideas and agreed to develop 3 prototypes, as well as moving forward with the Focke-Wulf design. Some quick thinking on the part of Ernest Udet and the self-made prototype was then included in the initial batch of 3, getting paid before the project had even begun. It was around this point that the ministry also wanted to examine the idea of turning this aircraft into a light bomber as well. After all, once it had scouted the enemy, why couldn't it handle it itself? The aircraft was redesigned to carry 2 fixed forward-firing 7.9mm machine guns and 2 handheld rear guns of the same caliber. The third prototype was redesigned to carry this, as well as having 4 underwing mounts to carry 110-pound bombs, enabling the 141 to perform light bombing missions. To improve stability with this new armament, the third prototype fuselage was lengthened and the overall wingspan was increased. But it was around here that an issue with the hydraulic system was discovered. During one test flight, the original prototype was unable to extend its landing gear fully and had to crash land in a field, damaging one of the wings. And this would be a problem that would come up again and again and again. But the fuselage wasn't the only thing that got upgraded during this phase, so too was the crew. The crew arrangement underwent modifications in the BV-141 to accommodate its dual attack and scouting focus. The pilot was seated on the port side, whilst the observer occupied the starboard side. The observer's seat was mounted on a track, allowing it to slide forward and aft. And this design would allow the observer to manage both the forward bomb sight and the aft-located radio equipment for scouting. And then if they encountered an enemy in the sky, the observer would also manage the upper aft firing machine gun. But this crew compartment was far from spacious, so this was a very tight configuration and very exposed. Remember that coffin comment I made before? Well, that was a nickname given to the aircraft because of just how exposed and vulnerable the crew were. Despite its unconventional design, however, the BV-141 earned a reluctant approval from the German Air Ministry. Although initially skeptical, they acknowledged that the aircraft had excellent handling characteristics, and its ability to meet the original contract specifications was massively exceeded. So with some reservations, the ministry ordered a pre-series of 5 aircraft, whilst the team at the factory kept dealing with that hydraulic system issue. The 4th prototype encountered another problem with the landing gear when one of the landing gears completely failed to deploy, causing significant damage to the aircraft on its crash landing. This mishap delayed the start of the official evaluation program, as this prototype had been designed for trials to see if the German Air Force wanted to pick up the aircraft. But despite this setback, the remaining 4 pre-series aircraft were completed on schedule, and the official flight testing was conducted with the 5th prototype in January 1940, with the pilots reporting that the evaluations were largely positive. But there was one more issue: the engine. This prototype would use a 865 horsepower BMW 132N radial engine. Whilst it was powerful, it didn't give the best speed compared to other aircraft. So the team went back to the drawing board and designed the BV-141B. It would have a more powerful BMW 801 engine, and 12 would be built as a second series pre-production run. But alas, the German High Command needed their scout plane yesterday and decided to go with that backup solution, the Focke-Wulf 189. Now, you see, this was a little bit unfair because the FW189 got around the same propeller issue that we discussed at the beginning of the video by having 2 propellers in separate twin booms. Now, this broke the spirit of the contest because it had 2 engines instead of 1, but it handled well, and the twin engines gave it crazy speed, and it had a great vantage point for scouting. And because it didn't look so crazy and looked more conventional, the High Command actually preferred it throughout the contest and put it into production without delay. In fact, I would say they were backing this horse to win right from the start. Then as the war began in earnest and the war in Russia heated up, there was an urgent need for the BMW 801 engines to be used in the Focke-Wulf 190 fighter aircraft, meaning no engines for our humble asymmetrical scout plane. But this wouldn't be the end of the program, as there would be a chance to scrap the scout part of the aircraft and turn it into a full-on dive bomber. In 1942, the Luftwaffe sought a replacement for the aging Junkers Ju-87 aircraft, and Bloom and Voss saw a chance to bring back their asymmetrical design and created the BV-237. The BV-237 retained the unique offset design and looked very similar to the 141, with the crew and armament housed in a nacelle position on the right, with the engine and tail structure on the left. This configuration provided the crew with the excellent visibility that helped it become possibly one of the best dive bombers. Well, at least on paper. The BV-237 was designed with multiple variants to fulfill dive bomber and ground attack roles. There was the single-seat version that had 2 forward-firing machine guns, 2 rear-mounted machine guns, which I'm not entirely sure how they would work, and there would be 2,000 kilograms of bombs. Then they would also create a 2-seater version with the second crew member firing larger cannons forward that could also carry 6 small bombs. And then there was a third version called the mixed power version that would have one of those fancy new turbojet engines. This jet engine would be mounted underneath the aircraft, giving it a massive speed boost, which was one of the flaws with the original 141 design. In early 1943, the BV-237 was presented to Hitler himself, who approved its production. However, Allied bombing raids over Hamburg that very summer, although narrowly missing the factories of Bloom and Voss, did disrupt the development. The German Ministry of Aviation ordered the work on the project to halt, with a plan to resume work later, replacing the steel frame with wood. Despite these efforts, however, by late 1944, the project was cancelled, and only a wooden mock-up of the BV-237 was ever completed. But just like clockwork, in 1944, the RLM would ask again for a replacement of a ground attack aircraft, the Junkers Ju-97, and Bloom and Voss would recycle the design into the P-194. It's time for the third round. Again, this would have the same asymmetrical design as the other aircraft and would be very similar to the BP-141. But this time, there would be a turbojet mounted low at the rear of the crew nacelle to give it that extra speed. This jet engine was designed to provide additional thrust, balancing out the power of the propeller. This aircraft would also have more powerful guns and have the ability to carry up to 500 kilograms of bombs in an internal bomb bay within the fuselage. This aircraft would also be designed with a high proportion of steel, simplifying its design through the use of components from other projects, including the BV-155 prototype and the original BV-237 that had just been cancelled. But despite all the promises that they had given the RLM, they decided to not go ahead with this new aircraft, or any new aircraft design, but instead adapt the existing Me-262 jet fighter into this tactical bomber role. And that would be the end of the Nazi asymmetrical designs. So whatever happened to the original BV-141 prototypes? Well, several wrecked BVs were found by advancing Allied forces, with one actually being captured by British forces and sent to England for examination. You know that the boffins there at the laboratory in England would be mightily confused by this design. But alas, no examples survive today. And as for the idea of asymmetrical design, did it actually die with the Nazis? Well, it would not really be used again much after World War II, well, apart from this monster, the Scale Composites Ares. This one actually replaces one engine on one side with a Gatling cannon, making it perhaps an even more superior ground attack aircraft than the A-10 Warthog. But that, my friends, is a video for another time, so let me know down in the comments if you want to see it. This video would not have been possible with the help from my fellow YouTuber and friend Rex Hanger, who provided the research and some of the footage that you've seen here today. Many thanks, and go check out his channel for the insanely detailed documentaries on all sorts of planes from this era. Thanks again so much for watching.